need it?
I don't need it, no.
You don't need it.
I just
leave
need
it just here.
my monitor here.
Okay, then.
So we're good.
The stage is yours.
So in technology, what can be done will be done. It's really invention that mothers necessity rather than the other way around. We didn't need a cell phone until it was there, and then suddenly we needed it, right? Well, this is especially true for giant companies. They find themselves doing lots of things that they can do, regardless of what the consequences might be. So let's take, for example, in 2011, this country, Germany, discovered, kind of noticed that Google had been driving around taking photographs with little cars of every single residence in the country, which it had already been doing in the United States, in Canada, and the UK, and France, and other places. But this kind of offended the sensibility here for good reasons. Our homes are private spaces. We didn't give permission for this. This offended a kind of sensibility that we had. Now, it doesn't matter what happened after that. I noticed today I can't find anything on there. I guess the Street View thing doesn't work here, and that's fine. Here's the thing. We didn't have privacy worked out. Now, we had privacy worked out. We've had privacy worked out. It's not controversial in the natural world. Among us here, we have privacy technologies. We invented the technologies first. We didn't come up with the laws first. We came up with the technologies first. We started peeling bears, and we started making cloths, and we're all wearing privacy technology. Privacy is a matter of selective disclosure, and it's also a matter of norms and of customs and of many other ways of signaling to others what's okay and what's not okay. So why didn't we have that? Why didn't we have that by 2011? Why do we not have it in our browsers even still very well? Our browsers should be like our cars or our bicycles. Instead, they're infected with every commercial website we go to with tracking beacons and cookies, and that's why we have the GDPR. The GDPR is a case of, you know what, we don't have the tech here. You guys don't seem to be walking around naked still. It's 23 years into this thing, but we're going to have to start enforcing this on the real privacy on the 25th of this month, 10 days away from now. The world is going to change. And it's going to change because hopefully they'll start enforcing. But we don't have the tech. Why don't we have the tech? Well, there are two reasons. One is that it's only 23 years. The internet that we know now really was born when the last of the backbones within it that forbid a kind of activity, it was the NSF net in the US, forbid commercial activity, and it was one of the backbones. TCP/IP says data could travel over any path. So as long as one of them said, no, we didn't have commercial activity. Once they went down, April 30th, 1995, e-commerce broke loose and we had a different world. But it's only 23 years. We've had 10,000, 20,000 years to work out privacy in the natural world. We have this new world. This world is a virgin territory. It's still Eden. We haven't developed it yet. The other reason has to do with identity. Because what we've had for a long time, ever since mainframes, is what Devin Lafredo, a teacher and an activist in the maker movement in the US, called administrative identity. It's important for organizations to have records, to have namespaces for all of us, to keep track of their customers, to do KYC and all of that. At the same time, he said, we also have, in the natural world, self-sovereign identity. And he called it that. He's the one who gave us self-sovereign as a term. He gave that to us. And what does that mean? It means you're in charge. You have your own private space. You are anonymous by nature. Have you ever noticed, like, for example, so here's my name tag right here. So let's say, and some of us have done this, you leave a place like this and you go to the nearest bar or something like that, and you're sitting there and the guy next to you says, hi, Bill, or whatever. How do you know me? Well, you're wearing a thing. Right? We don't walk around the world with these. We walk around here with them because it's a convenience, but we don't use these in the everyday world. And we don't use it there because anonymity is a grace. Anonymity is the natural state of things. But doesn't mean we are meaningless. We are distinctive. We are designed by nature to all look different, to all sound different, to all behave differently, to have different souls. Two people who come from the same sperm and egg, twins, can be radically different as human beings. The actress Laverne Cox in the US has a twin brother. They both came from the same egg. They're utterly different and distinctive as human beings. And that distinction is how we know each other apart. If we have a store, we know somebody by how they look. We haven't necessarily taken their name yet. And what blockchain is about, what self-sovereign identity is about, is restoring in the digital world what we've had forever in the natural world. So GDPR showed up in the absence of that. And the nice thing about the GDPR for me and for the companies that I work with is that the administrative systems of the world have said, holy shit, we got to change everything now. And all of a sudden, the world is open to things like blockchain, which they never would have been, I think, otherwise. So I want to talk briefly about what we can do now. Once we start getting self-sovereign identity, once we are in charge of ourselves in the world, that we couldn't when we're living only in an administratively defined world, where we have to live inside Facebook and Google and Apple and all of the other identity providers of the world. So let's go back to 1995. That's when my wife Joyce, who's here somewhere, and who's active in the Sovereign Foundation and actually spoke twice as much as I did at the last conference we were at. A lot of what I get credit for comes from her and from the weird questions she asks that are absolutely profound. So there's one she asked in 1995. It was shortly after her sister, one of her many sisters, took a job as the controller for Netscape, which is then a brand new company. Netscape was kind of our family company. We wore the swag and all that. And she asked a profound question. She's looking at e-commerce, going to all these different sites, Amazon and eBay being the big ones then, still around now, in a big way in Amazon's case, and asked this profound question. Why can't I take my shopping cart from one site to another? Why should I be stuck inside all these different silos? Why can't I have a wallet that's my own? Why should I have a Google wallet, an Apple wallet, and a Facebook wallet, and some other kinds of wallets that all belong to them and not to me? That are all suction cups on the tentacles of what Google got called by people here in Germany, a Datenkrake, a data octopus or a data monster. Why do I have to live inside one of those things? Another one that was asked 12 years ago when we started Project VRM, which is kindly given an award by Coppinger Cole in exactly 10 years ago here for the work we started. And the paradigmatic question we asked, the one that we still haven't seen in the world because we're still living in administrativeville, was how can I, if I change my last name, or if I change my address, or I change my email address, or some other thing like that, why can't I notify everybody in one move? I don't want to have to go like a bee from flower to flower to flower to flower, changing all of those different things. I should be able to do it once, just one time, for all of them. You can't get there from the identity provider relying party model. You have to get there from a self-sovereign model where you are in charge of who you are and how you relate to these companies. It's KYC going the other way. Know your companies, not that they just know you. And they can know you a lot better if you're in charge. They don't have to guess at you. So I want to give a couple of examples of the kinds of things we will start to see that have already been in the works for some number of years, mostly with small startups. One in the book that I wrote in 2012, which I thought I was late with, but turned out to be way ahead of its time, called The Intention Economy When Customers Take Charge. We called it there a personal RFP or a personal RFQ, and we're now calling this intent casting. And intent casting is where you do the advertising, but you do it in an anonymous way to start. I'm interested in this or I'm interested in that, and I will selectively disclose, just as I would walking down a street, whether or not I'm interested in something, and I will reveal my identity in a gradual way. I love Kim Cameron's laws that he came out with. He'll be up here next. In 2004, user control and consent, gradual disclosure for constrained use, justifiable parties. Those should be built into self-sovereign identity and the way that we relate to the companies of the world. If you go to the Project VRM site, you'll get to a blog. If you click on Wiki there, twice it turns out the way it is today, you'll get to our wiki where we have all of the developers already working on this. There are at least 20 companies working on intent casting already in the world. There are even more of those for controlling personal data. Controlling personal data is exactly what the GDPR wants for what they call the data subject. We should be in charge of the data that we reveal in the world, how it's used, and we should be able to do it in either through our own privacy policies and our own terms and conditions, turning that thing around and keeping a record of that, ideally on a blockchain. I can't think of another way to do it, but then again, I've got blockchain on the brain. There may be other ways to do it, but we need to be able to do that. And this goes by a lot of names: personal information management systems, data vaults, data lockers. Coppinger called it life management platforms, and Martin mentioned this earlier. We are going to have these. We need to have these, or we will not. We haven't arrived yet at the world that opened in 1995. So I think I'm at 17 minutes or close enough. I don't know. So it leaves enough time for questions. I may be the first speaker where Martin didn't come up like a timer and stand at the end of the stage.
Exactly. Doc, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have been super fast, but also super informative, as usual. And so thank you very much. And I think for our Q&A session, the one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to ask Juan Carlos Lopez Ruggiero of DXC Technologies to come to the stage as well. He will be a speaker in tomorrow's GDPR track. And so you had GDPR in the title of your speech. So welcome, Mr. Lopez Ruggiero. Hi.
Hi.
And so I think we are 10 days away from GDPR becoming effective. It would be really interesting what exactly will happen then. And I'd like to start with one question to you, because my strong belief is that so we talk a lot about consent and right to be forgotten and some other stuff, but I think there are some more things in GDPR which are not as prominently discussed as they should be discussed. And maybe you could just raise three of the biggest challenges imposed by GDPR to foster our conversation. There is a microphone over here.
Yeah, it works. Good question. In fact, there are a lot of things that are hidden, in fact, to the GDPR. And one of the consequences of the GDPR will be probably that somebody one day will ask me, Juan, do you know an expert on GDPR? I say, yes. Can I have the email? No. So this will be probably one of the consequences. But no, seriously, I think that, for example, the territorial scope of the GDPR is one of the big issues. Most of the organizations, I'm also a member of the EU Commission, by the way, and most of the organization didn't really understood the differences between Article 27 and Article 37. Just for information, Article 37 states that you need to appoint a DPO, a data protection officer, and Article 27 that you have to appoint a representative. Now the point is, when you have to appoint a representative, and it's mandatory for the non-EU based organization, and they need to appoint an EU-based representative because of the GDPR. And this is something that it's not really always clear, and the message don't come always in that way.
You need to have, as a non-EU company, you need to have a representative over here, but this is not a DPO, you need also a DPO.
Exactly.
Okay, and the second big
The second aspect that I will pick up here, it's for example related to HR. When you're doing the recruiting process, you're hiring somebody, what happens with the rest of the CVs of the resumes that you are not hiring? So the candidates have the right to say, please delete my information. But in some cases, HR have the right or need to store this information for further use. So they need to be prepared on answer these questions, please delete my data. What has nothing to do with the right to be forgotten. That's something different.
And number 3?
And the third aspect, what is in my view the first aspect, is what I call personally the IT dilemma. In terms that one of the hidden requirements, and this is a very big requirement, it's the data storage requirement of the GDPR. You will find no article inside the GDPR that talks about, but that's true. You need now more space. So on one side, IT needs to save money, so reduce TCO, but on the other side, to be conform and compliant. My very personal suggestion is to create a GDPR board with experts and try then to focus on the identification and categorization of the information that you have.
Doug, what is, from your perspective, the hidden thing in the GDPR people are not aware enough of?
Well, to me, the point of view that I take is entirely that of what the GDPR calls the data subject, you and me. What the GDPR attempts to do is, and I think it will do successfully, is put up a bunch of protections for individuals, but I think we are going to have a lot of permission to take action on our own. So, for example, as part of the work that I do and my colleagues do, we're going to do our best over the next 10 days to have everybody in the world turn off all third-party cookies on whatever browser they're on. At Customer Commons, our nonprofit, we have already instructions on how to do that on 5 browsers. All of them have that as an option, but we really want to make a movement out of this because, frankly, we want to cut the head off the entire ad tech business. The ad tech business is based on spying on us. It is Datenkranke, it is bad, and it needs to be killed. Okay. And it's I think the GDPR gives us a way to start killing a serpent in the world and replacing it with something much better, which is more ways for us as customers to signal companies what we're looking for and what our terms are and our conditions and start civilizing the net for the first time.
Okay, let's have a quick look at the questions if there are any. No.
No questions.
I think I want to bring up one point from my perspective. I think one thing what you say is important. The data subject right now has the right to raise complaints directly. So to the DPA, and that means the DPA needs to get active. It's different to all the regulations we had before. The other thing is, I think it's very interesting to look at the process between warning and fine. So if you look at a standard process, the fine is not the final step. The final step the fine is the final step, but probably the big step before is that you need to potentially interrupt your service, which can be far more harmful than the fine itself. If you look at some of the things the EU has published around it, it's a very interesting thing that they could bring in even more harmful things ahead of the fines. And so I think it's very good to look very careful at what GDPR brings, and there are so many interesting things in. We didn't get all. Doc?
Well, I have a question for you and for the audience
short
as well.
Question.
A short question. Is the EU going to come down on Google and Facebook on the 25th? And how hard?
Wait and see. I don't want to predict, but I think they will go for the big ones. What is your point?
Well, I don't think it will be just limited to Google and to Facebook. It is a regulation. And we are in Germany. And Germany is the first nation EU-wide that has transformed the regulation in law. So nobody knows what will happen, in fact. There have been a lot of what I personally call GDPR terrorism. In that sense, you mentioned the fines, for example. This is really the extreme measure and the last resort. It will not be the first. We have warnings, we will emit advices, and
it will be much education first.
It's educational.
Okay, so thank you very much. We're running out of time. Thank you, Doc, for your excellent keynote. Thank you for coming up to the stage and as an expert. See you tomorrow in your session.